A few months before Daryl Morey interviewed to be the Sixers president of basketball operations, he graciously gave a far more important interview on our very own Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, tackling a wide range of topics with Spike and Mike over the course of nearly an hour. Lucky for you, I've re-listened to that interview, and I'm here to bring you a few important takeaways that you might have forgotten, as quite a bit has happened in the world since then. Let's get into it. The first thing Morey talked about was the role of analytics in his decision-making.
But really all it is my job's no different than Red Auerbach in 1950 when he was running the Celtics, which is make great decisions all the time on draft, on trade, on free agency. And using data helps that. And using better data, more data, better analysis helps make those decisions. But at the end of the day, they're all human decisions. No spreadsheet's making any trade.
This is an important distinction that a lot of times gets lost in the caricaturization of Morey as this analytics worshiper. There's a perception that Morey operates under some ironclad analytics-based principles, that every decision is reached by what an analytical model says, or that he'd sign or trade for one player over another simply because their real adjusted plus-minus is higher. And there's no doubt a consideration of that type of information, like Morey says, but the appeal in hiring Morey is not simply that he understands math better than the previous regime, but rather that he's a creative thinker with a maniacal level of obsession for working the margins. Success on the margins has been hard to come by from the Sixers brain trust for the past few years, and Morey's ability to think outside the box is going to be crucial in helping the Sixers get out of their current situation. The second interesting thing Morey talked about was about Sam Hinkie and how a team operates differently when they're trying to contend versus when they're rebuilding.
So the whole reason you build up all the capital, and he did the best job I've ever seen, I think, at building it up, is at the time when you have a chance to win it, and this is one of the most open years, you go for it. And, there was a prominent player who could have been traded for even on a 1-year rental a year ago. I could see him just piling all into that. You have to be on a success cycle, which is, when you're down, you got to build up your store in the armory as much as possible. And then when you're up, you've got to use it all to eke out small advantages to increase your chance to win. And you're going to go through these cycles, but that's fine. That's natural.
This part was particularly interesting and I think helps inform how Morey might approach this job. First off, I think he vaguely alludes to the fact that he thinks Hinkie would have traded for Kawhi Leonard. But the real takeaway here is that if he thinks the Sixers have any title window whatsoever, he's likely going to make win-now moves until he feels that window is gone. The Sixers certainly don't have many assets still sitting in the cupboard, but Morey seems to be of the mindset that half-assing an attempt to win the title is not worth it. If he and ownership believe that the team should try to contend now, I'd be surprised if they don't go balls to the wall in trying to make that happen. The third thing Morey talked about was the balance of power in a front office when making decisions.
First off, there's this perception like you want the owner, just keep the owner away. No, owner bad. Random other dude good. Like, that's not. So I think owners, especially if they're good at asking the right questions, good at thinking through things, you want the owner involved. And here's why. People in my job can get short-sighted. They can be worried about the next 2 years, the next 3 years versus the long-term health of the franchise. The only person in the entire organization of a team that has the same incentives as the fans is the owner.
Now, there's definitely some level of lip service here. I doubt that the majority of GMs are eager to hear input from owners, but I think it shows part of why Morey was able to succeed and stick around for so long in Houston. Perhaps unlike Sam Hinkie, Morey seems quite adept at tending to all the voices in the room and making them feel heard. That is a crucial part of keeping the various egos surrounding a front office from engulfing each other. And with all the voices still within the Sixers organization, it should bode well for his ability to lead a functioning front office. The fourth thing Morey talked about was the traits that he likes to have in a head coach.
And you have a choice between two coaches. One coach, his relationship with players is a 10, and strategically he's about a 5. The other coach, strategically, he's a 10, as good as there goes. Relationship with players is a 5. Which coach do you choose?
So I just have one question. Is his relationship with players league wide? Like,
yes,
all players love him?
He is
the first one, no doubt. Yeah.
The relationship guy.
Yeah, because, I mean, having a coach that players want to play for is super important in the NBA because, you need to be, and in Houston, maybe it's not true in a smaller market. It's hard to recruit, but people like playing in Philly. They like playing in Houston. I want to coach who, and on the strategic side, I wish there were huge differences on how teams play, but there are. I mean, there are important differences, but they're not. Long way of saying it's much more important to get the top player than to have them be in the exact perfect system, if that makes sense.
This was an interesting point on Morey's part that led me to believe that he could be excited at the prospect of working with Doc Rivers. Rivers is as respected by players around the league as any other coach, and Morey may view that as a marginal edge in getting a star player or really any player to come to Philly. Certainly between Rivers, Morey, and Elton Brand, the Sixers have some serious name brand value to go into meetings with when they're looking at potential free agents who might want to play for the Sixers. And last but not least, on Philadelphia fans.
My only insight into Philly fans, and by the way, some of the best fans in the world, is my wife who grew up in New Jersey. And when Sam got the job, she told Sam, she's like, dude, you are in trouble. Like, they are crazy. Like, I'm not sure you're going to make it more than a few years. And she was completely right.
Nailed it.
Not for the reasons maybe she thought.
At least Morey is walking into the job with a decent feel for what the fan base is like. And after spending an hour with Spike and Mike, he should have a much better feel than any other potential front office hire would have. Thanks for watching. For the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, this has been Mike O'Connor.